Pesticides include a variety of chemicals used to destroy harmful insects or bacteria living on a plant. The intended effect of these pesticides is to stop or prevent a short crop yield due to these harmful insects or bacteria killing the plant off before it's time to be harvested. Pesticides include herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides that have contributed to a substantial increase in crop yields over the past 5 decades. There's been multiple research studies done on pesticides and their effects on crop yield. One in particular in India, we found that food grain production had increased almost 198 million tons by the end of 1997, over a vast amount of land. India is now one of the leading pesticide manufacturers and users in the country, and this has enhanced their crop yield production over the past few years. So now that we've discussed pesticides' effect on crop yield, we're going to talk about the unintended effects that pesticides have on individuals. It's been found that pesticides are very harmful to surrounding communities of both humans and various animals. Humans have a risk of developing chronic effects, such as those listed there, depending on what type of pesticide they're exposed to. If we think about a field of crops or a farm somewhere, you can think about all the organisms that live in and around that field and the people that work on that field. Research found that certain types of pesticides with acute toxicity can have serious effects on wildlife. Insecticides, such as the one talked about there in that quote, is known to chronically act as endocrine disruptors, causing extreme differences in rats, birds, and fish in the area. So pesticides are good for these crops, but they are negatively affecting the environment around them.
Populations are affected by pesticides in different ways. Populations that are affected include mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, insects, and other invertebrates, plants, and fungi. Mammals are affected by pesticides through neurotoxicity, which alters their behavior, altered metabolism, endocrine dysfunction, which results in reproductive failure, immunotoxicity, which is increased infection and parasite rates, and all of this increases mortality rates of mammals. Birds are affected by impaired foraging, which is neurotoxicity, altered metabolism, endocrine disruption, which causes eggshell thinning, which produces a population decline, and also immunotoxicity, which is the increased infection and parasite rates. Reptiles are affected through endocrine disruption, which causes gonadal abnormalities, which affects the population parameters, and therefore population decline. Amphibians are affected through altered behavior, altered metabolism, reproductive failure, developmental toxicity, which causes embryonic mortality, and higher parasite load. All of this results in a population decline. Insects and other invertebrates are affected through neurotoxicity, which causes decreased colony size, altered metabolism, affected memory, which increases mortality incidence. Plants and fungi are affected through growth modulation, altered metabolism, impaired photosynthesis, which is impaired phytoplankton. This decreases their population. Communities and ecosystems are also affected by pesticides because each population is part of a community that affects the ecosystem. They are affected because they are all connected and they depend on each other for survival. The different examples of effects on an ecosystem due to pesticides include affected nutrient cycles. Due to them feeding on each other, and as one is damaged or decreased, the other does not have a food source. Decreasing habitat heterogeneity and effective ecosystem functioning. If one community is not able to function, the entire ecosystem is therefore thrown off.
Figure 3 from the reading is a visual that displays the expected global change effects and the expected pesticide effects on wildlife species. So this figure is kind of correlating global change effects and how those global change effects can lead to unintended pesticide use and how that can have an impact on our wildlife species. So the green in the figure is the presumed global climate change impacts, and the yellow in the figure is the presumed pesticide impacts. So to provide an example to get a better understanding, a global change such as increase in temperature, so warming, can influence wildlife by sex determination and reproduction. But it's connected by because warming can also alter biotransformation, which can lead to unintended pesticide use, which impacts animals by disrupting their endocrine processes, which also has an impact on their sex determination and reproduction. So this diagram is just kind of showing how global change effects can lead to unintended pesticide use and how putting those two together can have an impact on wildlife species.
Next, we have to look at the concept of microevolution and how it will catch up with pesticides. So, microevolution is the change in a population over a small period of time, and it is a chance for non-target species with high reproductive output and a short generation time to prosper. Microevolution can cause a selection of resistant phenotypes to these pesticides. It is, however, unclear to what extent the selection of resistant traits can be generalized throughout an ecosystem rather than to just individuals. We also have to look at solutions to these problems and future research that must be conducted. So, the first future research that has to be looked at is biodiversity. And biodiversity is the amount of different species and different plants and animals that interact together to form an ecosystem, and this impacts the function of that ecosystem. Next, it is important to look at climate change, especially rising water temperatures. Rising water temperatures will impact the metabolic rates of animals, and there will also be temperature interactions with pesticides that will cause unknown effects on animals.